Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Cars and Canines. My two favorite things when I was growing up was cars and dogs. Today, I'm gonna show you one of my toys I've had for 20 years. It's my own personal Buick Grand National Regal 1986. Ain't that right, boy? Good boy. Let's go. This one is dear to me because back in 86 and 87, those were my impressionable years where the only people who could afford these cars were middle class, upper class white men. And even some of the kids drove these cars to their private schools. And I always wondered, like, man, what is that car? It sounds like a jet engine going by. What is that? I told a young man in my neighborhood, I said, listen, when I get grown, I'm gonna get a car like yours. He said, when you get my age, you're not gonna want this car. I said, watch me. In 2005, I decided to, I had a little itch. I was making a little money. I said, let me get me a Grand National. Didn't know the different Grand Nationals, the options it had, whether it's posi traction, power windows, etc. I met the guy online out in Bell Gardens. He sounded like Tone Loc. I want $15,000. I was like, I got it. He brought the car to my office. I test drove it. I said, I'm sold. We went to Wells Fargo, got a cashier's check in. Boom, we was off to the races. Of course, technology has changed over the course of 20 years. So I've done a few improvements. My guy, Abel, who did the engine work, he's gonna explain to you in detail what he did. But for what I remember from the big receipt, he did a lot of work. I went with the Alky control system back in 06, where it's had the ethanol kicks in and cools the engine off to give it that cold engine shock. We changed to aluminum drive shaft. We changed the stall converter to a 3200 stall converter by Art Car. I got bigger injectors, 42-pound injectors. I thought that was huge. Upgraded the turbo, and I got a computer chip by Eric at Turbo Tweak. In the Grand National, you got these codes in the back of your trunk. So let me show you these codes in the back of the trunk. So people, let me explain to you. I learned the codes by this forum called Turbo Buick Forum, about certain codes, because not every Grand National is created equally. So now I have this covered up, but there's a code right here that has all the different codes that tell you whether it's posi traction, whether it's an actual Grand National. But because I went all in, you know, when I go in, I go all in. I get the keychain. The point of the purpose is that you can actually read what your Buick has with the actual GM codes that are in the body. Because I love to keep it vintage 80s, I couldn't go without having this right here. You guys are not gonna know what this is, but I will. Watch this. Oh, I still keep my cassettes. Oh, Back in Black. Houdini.
Listen to the bass drum hit the ground.
I don't even know who that is. And I did a few upgrades. One of them is which I made my audio system Bluetooth, right? Because these radios, Delco radios, are a piece of shit, but it was the best at that time. So I've upgraded my radio, put a nice sub in there, put a nice amp, music, everything's Bluetooth. So that's what I've done as far as the sounds. But I wish I could show this, but I'm not pulling this off of you guys. This staying where it is. In the 80s, this was considered plush for the Grand National. You had the two-tone seats. I had everything done over, of course, because Father Time is undefeated. I had the seats redone. They was able to match it, you know, for the right materials. Feel like corduroy. Had the seats re-cushioned. I had the mats custom made. Now the Grand National, they didn't have an arm rester, so online people were making these. So I need this. So this is not original. The other thing is you had the small rear view mirror, but I put something on top of the small rear view mirror and made my peripheral a lot wider. It didn't come with a boost gauge cluster on the frame right here. The turbo boost gauge it's in the dash still, so I have two actually. The oil and water pressure gauges were not down here. We put that in here because we had to see this car is so sensitive that you need to know what's going on as far as air and fuel ratio, the pressure, the temperature, because again, this is a high performance S sedan, and you gotta know what's going on. The cars are very sensitive, almost like Doberman. Well, I had the headliners redone, the dash replaced, but I put a lot of time and money in this car over the course of years, and I'm fortunate enough to still have it today. Other than that, everything is pretty much original. And of course, my antenna still works. Let me show you guys. See, back in the day, antennas would go up and down. And that's about it. So now what we're gonna do is talk about the heart and soul of this vehicle, which is the engine. So the Grand National actually came out in 1982, but it was basically all about spoilers and the effect, the look, but it had nothing to do with performance. Actually in 84 is when they put the 3.8 sequential fuel injection turbo in there. The difference is the turbo was in the back. It was a hot air vehicle. It had no intercool, but it was pretty fast. It had about 200 pounds. They had 200 horses. But where the game really changed is when in 1986 and 87, when they made it an intercool, they put the turbo closer towards the front, it changed the game. There's a different types of Buick Regal. You got the WH1, which is my favorite. And the reason why I like that one is because the WH1 to me was two-tone. It was gray and black. I'm looking for one right now, but at a reasonable price. So if you got out there, hit me up, leave in the comments, low mileage, two-tone WH1. People think that they see an all-black Buick, it's a Grand National. Actually, some of them are W02 models, but they're T-type Regals, but they're all blacked out. Black bumper filler, and the interior is gray, but it doesn't have the two-tone interior. Those are turbo T-types. Now, they're the same engine concept, but the packaging is different. And then you have the WE4. Those are more prevalent out there where you see them in light blue, maroon, and even white. And you see them in black, but the bumper is chromed out. So those are the different type of Buicks. Grand National came out in 86, right? And they came out in 87. This is an 86, but I put the black grille where they changed the grills on the 87. I put an 87 grill on my 86 Grand National. They sold a lot of those. Those were the pinnacle icon of the turbo Regals. In 87, they had a limited edition, which is called the GNX. They collaborated with McLaren. Is it McLaren, Abel? Come on in, Abel. This is the guy that did the engine work. Come on in, Abel. This is Abel right here. He's based out of Ontario. His Instagram handle, follow him if you want some performance work done on your engine at FR Performance Engineering right here on Instagram. This guy's a genius, believe it or not. In 87, we were talking about the GNX, they made about 547 of them, right? And what was the key difference between the GNX and the regular Grand National?
Well, they did a couple of things to it. So they got some suspension work, they braced it up, rear end. And I think the key thing that a lot of people don't know this, but I was involved in a little bit of not development, but I used some of those things too in my race car, in my Mazda. So the key thing to the Grand National that gave it the extra oomph over the GNX over the Grand National was that the engineers used the ceramic turbine wheel on the turbo.
Yeah.
So by it being ceramic, it was super lightweight compared to the steel one. So even though, let's say it's still running the same amount of boost, it's still the same amount of engine, it was gonna spool up so much faster and you get that oomph right away. Right away. Instead of having to wait, it was like basically almost no lag with the GNX because of that ceramic turbine wheel. And that was, you know, Garrett doing that at the time.
That's right, that's right. See, that's why I defer to him. Over the years, I've had my engine redone with new technology. And when I first got the car, it was no such thing as flex fuel sensors on the Grand National or whatever. But we did some engine work in here. And I know half of the list of what we did, but he knows all of the list, but we're not gonna give you all of the secrets. So let me pop this hood right here. We're gonna go through. Abel's gonna tell us what we did. I know we put bigger injectors in there. All right, so let's open the hood here. Abel's gonna explain to us all of the things that changed the actual performance of this vehicle. I've been dealing with Eric at Turbo Tweak for many years when he was making the chips. Still make the chips, but instead of going with the fast system, we went with the turbo computer system.
Yeah, it's called the Buick ECU GN.
Yes.
And it's basically he worked with Mega Squirt, and then they got something going for Grand National specific only that works awesome in these cars. Works really, really good.
And also we put in a flex fuel sensor. So basically I can go from E85 to pump gas or have both. And the sensor can tell me, do I have more fuel than E85? And it will go back and forth. It will pick up the one that needs to be burned. What I noticed we did too, we changed the injectors. We got 130-pound injectors.
Yes, 130-pound Bosch injectors.
Right. We changed the turbo. We got a bigger turbo, dual ball bearing.
Dual ball bearing precision, 64, 66.
I already did a front mount intercooler. We put a 3-inch downpipe and we changed the radiator to aluminum.
Yeah, so actually when you came to your car and the motor was hurt and we had to rebuild it, you know, we were talking about the different options, and actually this is the first car that I actually did a flex fuel on a Grand National. And then once we got it and we tore it down, I seen the parts you had. You didn't want to get too crazy with the build, but I'm glad you listened to me on some things. So you already had forged pistons in it. So basically we kept your factory rotating assembly with the forged pistons in it, but we went with the Champion ported cast iron heads. And then you let me go through them. A lot of the problem with these cars, a lot of people don't know, the valve springs.
Yes.
So you're very limited to, once you start trying to push them or performance with the valve springs, and the cost involved and the work, and you have to have people that know how to do that. So we went with the Champion heads. We upgraded to some really good valve springs. And then we also put a better ignition on here, because the factory ignition is basically controlled by itself. The car will actually fire up without the computer, because everything is in the little unit that comes from the factory, but it doesn't work too well. So we put the different coil pack from the newer GM cars to really light off the fuel. And then we also went with the electronic boost controller, which the computer controls. So depending on your E85 content or your gasoline content, it will vary how much boost. It does it all automatically, so that it still remains super safe. And you can have fun and you can get the most out of it depending on how much E85 is in it or not. And then we made it so that the wastegate would go into the downpipe, so you wouldn't get a lot of noise. So whenever you get on it, it stays nice and quiet. Some people like the screamer pipe. I personally like to stay low key, especially when you're getting on it. The last thing you want to do is draw attention.
I don't know if you did it or if Lonnie at Care Automotive, shout out to Lonnie at Care Automotive. He made it where after you finished the build and I went to him for a few of the little things, he changed the brake calipers. I got Willwood brake calipers. When you get on the turbo and you hit it real hard and you get off, it says,
Oh yeah.
What we did, I don't know if you did it or Lonnie did it, he did something where it just says,
Yeah, the blow-off valve.
the blow-off valve. So there's no more that you hear when people get off the engine and turbo. So the blow-off valve has been altered or fixed where I don't get that noise.
Yeah, basically that's what we did. We rebuilt the motor, completely rebuilt it. Like I said, the key thing to it, running really, really good, is the Champion heads. You know, the factory heads ported and putting those bigger valve springs up. And of course, you know, E85, anything that's turbo, it's gonna love E85. It's higher octane, it runs cooler, and these Buicks, they love the cold weather. They love to run cooler.
A lot of folks now who got flex fuel vehicles, these new ones, they don't realize what E85 fuel really does and what's the benefits of it. For the people who don't know, explain why E85 fuel is so much better for these vehicles.
Well, first of all, the reason I love it is because it's a lot cheaper than gas.
Yes.
But the main thing is that it's really high octane, but it's sort of like alcohol. It burns really cold. It's not like gasoline. So with gasoline, the more power you put through the motor, the more gas that's going through it, the hotter everything gets. It's like it's baking. But with the E85, it's like alcohol. The more power you run through it, the more fuel. It does a cooling effect inside. So that's why
Almost like
turbo
when I had
cars love it.
the SMC system, alky system, how when I would get on, I have to press the button and it would shoot methanol.
Yeah, methanol
in
straight
it
methanol.
through here, and then to get into the
motor, into the
intake, and it cools the engine off, right? And you would have to do a timer. You would have to do it just right.
Well, you also program that. I don't really like to do it that way, because those alcohol systems are mainly meant to cool your air charge down, so that what you ideally want is by the time the alcohol hits the pistons or the head, everything has dissipated and it just did its job cooling down the air charge. But a lot of the people in the Buick community, they use it as an additional fuel. So they stuff a ton of alcohol in there, run gasoline, and use the alcohol so they can get more power, run more boost, and more timing.
I told people before that these cars thrive on cold air.
They love the cold.
They love the cold. So I was on the highway yesterday, bringing it out, getting it ready for you guys for this video shoot today. And it was pretty cold outside around about 9, 10 o'clock in the morning still here. And the highways were freed up. And I was doing like 85. First of all, it's easy to go 85, 90 in these cars on a cool day. And because you don't require much power to go fast. And I remember when I punched it a little bit, I almost lost control at 90 miles an hour. And that's the downfall of these cars, that they're fast, but at certain speeds, it starts feeling like a damn boat. It's uncontrollable.
Well, your car looks very nice, the stance and everything. You can help that situation by obviously going with the bigger Mickey Thompson and stuff like that. But if it's cold out, you got to get some heat in the tires, and you got to have a big sticky tire, because they make a lot of torque. You know, the nature of this Buick motor, they almost make the same amount, or in some cases they make more torque than horsepower. So it's real easy for them to light up the tires, you know, and get,
Right.
you know, break the tires loose.
I see a lot of street races. I see a lot of track races. Of course, some of those track races, they have stage 2 motors in them, obviously. But for the ones that's not, even the street races with the Buicks, if you notice, it's usually at nighttime or Midwest or East Coast where it's cold. When it's cold, there's hardly nothing with it for a quarter of a mile, for a very short period of time, right? And so these cars thrive under cold air because cold air is much denser. And that's why if you go underneath here, you see a nice big air vent that goes under here that sucks the air in and pushes it through the engine. Thanks for telling us about the engine that he did, because actually he's a doctor of this. I'm just a patient, right? Again, man.
All right.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Hey, again, people, check Abel out if you got any high performance. Can you tell them what kind of cars you work on, what work you do?
Mainly what I specialize is Mazdas, and I started with the Grand Nationals because this was my dream car when I was in high school, and I have one of my own that that was the very first thing I bought when I got some money. I've had mine since 1992. But basically, I mean, I work on LSs, big blocks, anything that has to do with racing. That's what I used to do.
How about this RX-7 you was talking about? Was it RX-7?
I've had an R100 and RX-7 and my current race car, an RX-8. I used to drag race quarter mile, making anywhere from my first cars, you know, 900, 1,000 to 1,800 horsepower.
Hey man, appreciate it again.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
The Buick Grand National. There is no substitute.